And so the most effective way to develop extreme motivation and personal accountability is to get clear on who you are and why you're on this planet and what you're going to do about it, your mission. So this is like one of the most fundamental things I teach. In fact, it also is probably the ultimate secret to resiliency and mental toughness is when you're doing what you know you're supposed to be doing, there is no quit. Multitasking degrades your output by about 40%. So you think you're getting more done, but you're actually getting 40% less done, and you're doing a worse job at it.
That's Mark Devine. He's a former Navy SEAL commander, current entrepreneur, and New York Times bestselling author with a PhD in global leadership and change. He's dedicated his life to unlocking human potential through integrated training in mental toughness, leadership, and physical readiness. He also shares such insights in his book, Unbeatable Mind. So you'll learn 1, how to fix your broken attention span, 2, a simple 20-second breathing protocol for resetting your nervous system, and 3, how to fuel extreme motivation. And if you want a quick summary write-up of the actual takeaways that Mark shares, I recommend you mosey over to awesomeatyourjob.com and sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter. I'm Pete Bacchitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Mark. Mark, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to hear your wisdom when it comes to having an unbeatable mind and resilience and so much good stuff. Could you maybe kick us off with a thrilling story that tees up some of these great lessons about mental toughness? No pressure.
Thrilling story. Okay, so I was at SEAL Team 3 doing some parachute training. I jumped out of the helicopter about 1,200 feet in the air. I was a second jumper out, and a static line jump, so it was pretty low. It was nighttime. So I'm popped out and my chute deploys, which is always a good sign, as you might imagine. I'm thinking, this is just beautiful evening. And I'm doing a dream job. Like anyone would love to be like jumping out of a helicopter in the middle of the night and the moon is bright and everything. And I suddenly see another jumper coming toward me, which was unusual because as a second one out, I should have been above this guy, but somehow he must have had an uplift and he was coming right toward me. And of course, from our training, I knew that for a mid-air collision, right, you're supposed to pull your right toggle. And so I pulled my right toggle and he's supposed to pull his right toggle and both jumpers would then veer away.
Yeah, it makes sense. Good standard rule.
Yeah, that's the SOP, standard operating procedure. So I pull my right toggle. He pulls his left toggle.
Oh.
And he collides with my chute. My chute just collapses. Now, mind you, I'm about 1,000 feet in the air then, and that is about 1 second per 100 feet. So I've got about 10 seconds to live. And so I immediately went into the practices that I had been training, not just in the SEAL, but for 4 years prior to, through my Zen and through my martial arts training. And that was the default mode for me, which was I obviously very grateful for because it saved my life. So I just started breathing really slowly, calmly, and reciting the mantra.
There's not too many breaths.
Right, exactly. I had about 6 or 7 of those breaths on the way down. Probably a lot less than that, actually. And the key point is I didn't react with fear. So my parachute absolutely collapses. So I go through the SOPs. I'm calming my mind. I'm breathing deeply. I'm remaining positive about this situation. And I start to, yank on my risers, which is the first thing you're supposed to do to try to get them to get air. And I got nothing, no response. And so I think, okay, second order of business here is to deploy my reserve. So I take a deep breath, calmly pull out my reserve ripcord, punch it, throw it out. And my reserve doesn't catch any air. Now I'm down to about 300 feet. And at the same time, I'm just super calm, right? I'm not freaking out, which allowed me to think, okay, maybe I can go back to the main and work that one again. So I went back to that and started yanking on those risers again. And about 100 feet above the ground, which is practically nothing, my main chute caught enough air so that when I landed hard, but I was super relaxed and I did a perfect parachute landing fall, or PLF, meaning I just rolled out of it and ended up actually standing. The reason it was interesting is that had I not had the training that I had, I would undoubtedly have reacted with fear. And my heart would have been racing. My mind would have been racing out of control. I wouldn't have been able to calmly and methodically think through how to solve the problem in the 8 or 10 seconds that I had. And so I walked away. without a single broken bone, which is pretty incredible. That scenario, not necessarily like a parachute accident, but I had multiple scenarios like that in my SEAL experience, my SEAL days, where shit hit the fan, everything went wrong. And instead of reacting negatively or reacting out of fear, I was able to calmly deal with the problem. Now, you might think, well, all SEALs are trained this way. And it is true, right? We are trained to be calm under pressure and whatnot. But to have these skills in the first year of my SEAL career was fully attributed to meditation. And I started a practice of Zen meditation when I was 21. And it's a big part of really why I became a SEAL. And I could tell that story too, but it really had a profound effect on my nervous system and my ability to focus and to develop clarity under extreme pressure, which I found to be pretty useful, as a special operator. Anyway, so I think experiences like that led me to want to delve deeper into those practices, into the development of what I now call unbeatable mind, development of the mind and the body and the spirit, and, really plumb the depths of what's possible for a human being. And so that's why, later on, I ended up kind of really refocusing and really going deep into that territory of human performance and the what's possible for humanity, which is what I do today.
Well, mission accomplished, sir, in a thrilling story delivered. So you've learned a lot about this stuff with regard to mental toughness and staying calm under difficult times. Can you share what's perhaps the most surprising or counterintuitive thing you've learned that when you share with people, they're a little bit puzzled, like, really? Is that true?
Well, when I teach SEALs, I have to use stories for the young guys, right? Sometimes I'm training, 18-year-old kids who want to be a Navy SEAL. And one of the stories I tell them, and they come in and think, okay, they're going to learn mental toughness and how to be a badass Navy SEAL from Mark Devine and through my SEALFIT team and program. And they think mental toughness is just about really learning how to be hard, like how to tough it out, how to gut through, like my teammate Goggins' story is like, okay, you can always do more. When you hit the wall, you're capable of 40 times more. I just got to be tougher. Suck it up, buttercup. And I say, that's actually really flawed thinking. It's important to be hard when you need to be hard, but it's also incredibly important to be soft when you need to be soft. And what I mean by soft, because SEALs don't like that, like I'm not soft. And so what I mean by that is to be really flexible and pliable and relaxed, and to learn how to let go. So you can interpret that a lot of ways. So the story I would tell is like, if a tsunami's coming and it was inevitable that it's going to just knock everything down in its path, would you rather be the mighty oak and strong, or would you rather be like the lowly reed and super flexible? And they said, well, in that scenario, I'd rather be the reed, because, the reed is just going to get washed over and then it's going to pop right back up and carry on with its life. Whereas the oak is just going to get swept away and it's going to get killed. See, that's right. So mental toughness, the big aha is that mental toughness is actually a balance between the hard and the soft. And also, if you want to use the Eastern concept, a balance between the yin, which is the hard, and the yang, which is soft. Yin represents forcefulness, get it done mindset, pushing through the pain. And the yin, the soft side, represents receptivity and creativity and flexibility and taking time to recover, right, and relax. So one of the reasons that the SEAL athletes that I train are so successful is this principle put into practice through their training regimen, through how they navigate their lives, through how they approach even a single day, right? You got to balance the hard and the soft. Otherwise, you're going to break.
Well, could we hear a story of someone who internalized some of these principles and saw a cool transformation as a result?
Every one of the SEALs that I've trained have internalized it. I'll give you an example. So there's a guy named Shane. Now, Shane recently got out of the SEALs and went to Rutgers med school, right? He's now a doctor. But he came to me like an 18-year-old, like hardcore, heavy weightlifter and just really kind of beast mode guy. And most of the guys come, if you want to be a Navy SEAL these days, you're already pretty fit. And what I do through my training was round you out and give you all the skills of mental toughness, resiliency, emotional control, the softer side. And then I make sure that the physical is going to be sustainable for the year-long training that you're going to be in. And what I mean by that is most guys come to me and what they lack is not, they're great runners, they're great in all around great shape, but they lack the durability to punish their body the way the SEALs will punish it every single day. And so that durability is kind of a mixture of like physical stability, usually in your joints and your spine, as well as the ability to hold your mind on the task over a long period of time, which brings in the concept of yin and yang, or hard and soft. And so we train them. So I had to train Shane to basically get out of his own way and stop just pushing like everything was a competition. So we call it co-opetition. Everything was a competition in the sense you wanted to compete with yourself and put your best effort in. But if that best effort was going to lead to an injury or degradation of the team's capacity, then that was flawed thinking. And so what I taught Shane was that even in the course of a single evolution and also in a day, like we consider each day like a major evolution, it was a performance sport just to get through the day. Because when we train for special operations, you're training like 8 hours a day or longer just to get ready for it. And then when you go through training, you're training for 12 to 16 hours a day. So we would do hard things during that, but we would also spend time sitting and just doing what I call box breathing, right? Just breathing for arousal control. And we would spend time meditating and concentration practice, right? To deepen our attention control and our concentration. And I had them doing yoga, right? In fact, at first, back in 2006, when I was teaching these skills, I learned very quickly that I shouldn't call it yoga. Right? Because the guys would cross their eyes and some guys were like, I can't, my religion forbids me from doing this. I'm like, what? So I changed it to functional mobility, integrated development, right? Those types of terms I used. And you see those throughout Unbeatable Mind. But if someone who's ever really approached development the way that from a different perspective, you could say, well, that Unbeatable Mind is actually kind of a compendium or a combination or an integration of Eastern practices such as yoga and mindfulness and breath work with Western practices of peak performance, sports psychology, Western therapeutic depth psychology, and a little bit of just Navy SEAL kickassery. So I brought all that together and I had to simplify it and present it in a way that an 18-year-old kid would be like, yeah, this is awesome. And it really works. So I taught Shane and these other SEALs how to not just be hard, but to balance that out with these practices that really created a total warrior, right? A warrior that could be calmly sitting in a meditative posture or visualizing their mission, but they're simultaneously just absolutely alert. And the explosive power that they have is like a coiled spring, right? But it's locked and loaded. It's not going to release until absolutely ready. And those are the skills that I think are super valuable for everyone these days, right? We have a saying that in the military, we prepared for VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And back in my day, that was episodic. Like you go to war and you're going to VUCA. Or if you're going to do a specific operation, right? Maybe a clandestine op, the VUCA is basically time on target, right? Or if something goes wrong. But nowadays, they're using that term pretty frequently in business world because everything is changing so fast and it's so volatile and so uncertain and so complex and ambiguous that the entire business world now is VUCA and it's persistent. It's not episodic. So the skills that I taught the SEALs and I taught through Unbeatable Mind are now looking more and more useful, if not imperative, for business leaders and everyday leaders for that matter. This idea that you have to be calm and clear and focused and basically be able to declutter all the crap, discern what's really important, what's really true, to be in control of your thoughts and your emotions at all times so you don't get triggered into reactivity, and to be an exceptional teammate because your ego has been honed, refined, polished, set aside, whatever term you want. And you really are recognizing that what's in your interest is usually what's in the team's interest. So you put your eye on the team and help the team succeed. And through the team success, you find success and also more purpose and meaning. So the transformation is multidimensional, in other words. We're transforming an individual to be more capable from a skill perspective, but also more competent, confident, and conscious from kind of the internal awareness and sense of self and perspective lens.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about some of the secret sauce, the means by which one pulls off some of these cool things. So holding your mind onto a task for a long time is something you highlight. And that's something that I hear from listeners, that it's hard in terms of there's a lot of pings, beeps, distractions, emails, whatever, or there's just a task that's boring, it's not interesting to them, or it just keeps going and going and going. What are some approaches that we can use to pull that off well?
It's a great question. And there's a lot of simple tactical things. And then there's the stuff to training your mind, right? The tactical things are to really just commit to doing less things and doing them better, right? So stop multitasking. Multitasking degrades your output by about 40%, right? So you think you're getting more done, but you're actually getting 40% less done, and you're doing a worse job at it. And multitasking trains distractibility. You must say, well, I only do one task at a time. But if you've got your phone near you and you're prone to looking at the alerts when they pop in because you think, oh, there's an important text or there's an important phone call, that's multitasking. And that's training distractibility. So you're bleeding off your attention, bleeding off your ability, your energy, actually, right? Which is going to lead to low grade motivation, like piercing a balloon and it's just bleeding out. So things like that. Starting to turn off, like I have no alerts on my phone whatsoever.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I mean, and that was I finally had to be like, get this thing out of I wanted to throw my phone in the freaking ocean one day. I'm like, I'm tired of this thing. So I took off all the alerts and I take a vacation from the phone, right? Every day you should have that phone out of your sight for a couple hours or longer, certainly when you sleep. But you also should take a vacation from it once a week for the whole day or most of the day, right? So I think that, it's kind of like intermittent fasting with your digital device is a really smart thing because you're getting your attention back. You're rebuilding energy that was bled off through that device. Don't watch any news or any like network TV. Like network TV, it's built today for high-speed mind that is a very distracted mind. And even I heard Netflix, like I can't watch Netflix because most Netflix shows, movies are designed for split screeners.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's why they keep repeating things now.
Yeah, exactly. There's no depth whatsoever. They basically expect that the viewer is not paying attention. And that's why they're skin deep and they skip all over the place. They don't leave any of the plot for you to figure out anymore, So if you think you need that playing in the background while you're doing work, my son does that. And it's because his mind is trained that it needs that kind of distraction. And it's unfortunate because it's bleeding off your attention. So, and the other thing is like with those shows and also with commercials, they move so fast that they're training your brain to have that kind of fast twitch reactivity, which is very challenging then when you try to shift focus and do any deep work, right? Your brain needs to actually slow down. And you need to learn how to slow your brain down in order to do the deep work. So I recommend not even watching TV and forget about how negative this stuff is. And the reality that even through the TV shows and the movies, not just the commercials, but your mind is being trained and conditioned to accept a reality that might not be true. Let's not even talk about the news, right? That's just pure mental conditioning and propaganda. I have this saying that I like to say a lot, but if you're not training your mind, then someone else is training it for you.
Oh,
because essentially your mind is the sum total of all that you've consumed mentally through your experiences, through your reading, through your screens, and through the interactions that you have. So if you want to change your mind, then you've got to change the input. And you've got to basically deconstruct all the false ideas and beliefs and ways that your brain works, such as being extremely distractible and operating at like a gamma level when you should be operating at a high alpha, low beta level. So those are the tactical things. The training aspect of this, Pete, is like radically simple in its form, but difficult in that it requires a lot of discipline to do. And it's simply like I use the box breathing, which I referenced earlier, as a container for a series of mental discipline practices that bring you that calm, focused clarity and ability to really, really get shit done at a high level without the distractions. So let me explain real briefly how that works. So box breathing, it's a practice that I coined back in 2006 when I was training. Remember I said I couldn't use like yoga terms and, and I had learned breath practices through my Zen training when I was 21. And then later on, I really did get into like the traditional 8 limbs Ashtanga yoga, which is mostly about meditation, concentration, self-awareness, introspection, and the stretchy, bendy physical part is the least of it, right? It's a process of transformation. And so I learned breath practices through there, and I knew it was called pranayama. And pranayama means controlling the life force, because breath is life. It's not just oxygen, it's life, it's prana, it's chi, it's energy. So when you do breath practices, what you're doing is taking control of the life force, and you're consciously using that life force to purify your mind, open your heart, and to train your mind to tap into greater powers that every human being has the capacity for. So instead of calling it pranayama, because I tried to do that for a couple of my classes and they're like rolling their eyes and thinking I'm gone off the deep end. So I just said, okay, we're going to do a simple practice. I called it box breathing. And that is to all the principles that we now know to be so important for breath work were kind of unknown back in the mid 2000s. But I knew what worked for me, and I've been practicing and training and seeing the benefits on myself for years. And that is deep diaphragmatic nostril breathing. Right? Nostril breathing, mouth closed, eyes closed if you are in a practice setting, eyes open if you're like standing in line at the bank or something, you can do this practice. And that deep nostril breathing, we did it in a pattern of 5 count inhale, 5 count hold, 5 count exhale, and 5 count hold. So it had a pattern of a box or a square, hence the box breathing. If each count is roughly 1 second, right, you're talking about a 20-second interval for one full box breathing cycle, and that's 3 breaths per minute. And over time, when you practice it, if you turn this into a daily practice, and my recommendation or my prescription is 20 minutes in the morning when you first wake up and 20 minutes in the late afternoon, over time, this has an extraordinary effect just on your physiology. And here's what it does. Number one, because you're breathing through your nose in that slow, controlled, deep diaphragmatic way, you're massaging your vagus nerve, and that's stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. That's the yin function I was talking about. That's the receptivity, the calming, the relaxation, which is getting your body and your brain into homeostatic balance. So you're bleeding off all the excess stress that you build up over your lifetime until you get into this perfect state of homeostatic balance. And the other thing that happens is, because you're breathing in slowly, 5 count in, 5 count out, and holding for 5 count, when you're operating throughout the day and you're not doing box breathing, which you're not going to be doing that most of the day, you're going to be doing regular breathing, but your breathing then naturally begins to reshape itself into that form of 5 count in and 5 count out through the nose. And we now teach that, and we call it tactical breathing as a practice, but it becomes something you quite naturally do. And so that's 6 breaths per minute, right? 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. That's 10 seconds times 60 seconds. That's 6 breaths per minute.
Oh, so no holds, in the other word.
Yeah, right. So during the day, the practice will lead you to this nostril breathing, 6 breaths per minute, which astoundingly, research has come in on this in the recent last 2 or 3 years, that is the ideal breathing pattern for health and longevity. And we just kind of stumbled on this, and we've been teaching it since the early 2000s. So what an incredible benefit. And this, again, we're just talking about physiological at this point. The term we use is arousal control. You're controlling your arousal response. Arousal response is simply your left hemisphere brain is wired to detect threats. And it's 5 times as negative as it is positive as a result of that. So you got this mechanism built for survival that is through the amygdala constantly sniffing everything that's happening in your environment, right? Every stimulus, external and internal, and saying, is this safe or is this unsafe? And at least 5 times more than positive, it's saying it's not safe, it's negative. And when that happens, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight or freeze. And that's dumping adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisol into your system to get your body ready to fight. Well, the problem is 99% of the time, it's really not a threat, right? It's really not a threat. right? So that alert comes in, you think it's your boss, the phone rings and you see that it's a creditor, you're in traffic and someone cuts you off. Then that could be a threat, but most of the time it's not. But you're reacting negatively and it's jacking you up into this sympathetic arousal response. And the problem is that when your sympathetic nervous system keeps getting triggered like that, then your parasympathetic response atrophies. It quite literally goes offline because it says, well, you don't need me. It's not getting, just like other channels in your brain. If you don't use it, you lose it. So what I found is even with these young guys that I work with and every one of the older clients I work with, they're stuck in hyperarousal. So this simple practice of box breathing will reset their nervous system so that the parasympathetic nervous system comes back online. And then it slowly, with certainty, bleeds off all that excess stress and brings the hormones back into balance. And then you're sleeping better, and you're feeling better, you got more energy, so you're exercising better. Everything comes back into balance. And people just through this practice have literally lost excess weight they were carrying, and just by breathing effectively. It's pretty extraordinary. So that arousal control has a pronounced and profound physiological and physical effect to bring your body back into balance. And guess what? Your brain also, because it's part of your body, comes back into balance as well. And your brain starts to operate more effectively instead of that high gamma distracted state, which is reinforced by your environment, right? In this culture that we live in with its fast pace and constant distractions, it begins to actually function at a slower level in a mid-beta range. And even when you're doing the box breathing practice, it'll drop into a high alpha or mid-range alpha. This has extraordinary benefits now in the mental realm because that subjective experience of that is of more calmness and more clarity because your mind isn't racing. You get less of the monkey mind popping around, popcorn mind. So already it's having an effect on training the quality of your mental experience. So the physiology then spills over into the psychology. The second part of this, Peter, is that I ask the students to focus keenly on that box pattern, like they're Inspector Clouseau, and they're watching every little nuance of it, every little nuance of the inhale with internal eyes, like they're watching it and they're experiencing it with their internal senses. You have 5 external senses and a number of, I've read 5 internal senses. I mean, internal sight, internal auditory, right? Internal sensations. And so you turn those directly toward the breathing pattern itself. And we say you watch it closely. You can even visualize it if you want. We have an app called Unbeatable Box Breathing where it shows a box being filled in as you do the breath. So you can watch that for a while and then visualize it, right? Now, what that is doing is holding your attention on one thing, right? One thing only, and that's this box pattern, right? So this is like classic Zen training. All Zen training starts out with concentration. In fact, Zen is primarily a concentration path. It's one of the 2 primary paths of meditation are concentration or mindfulness. Most people don't realize is that concentration is a prerequisite for mindfulness. And this is why people jump into mindfulness and they fail because they just simply can't do it because they can't control their mind. They can't control their attention. So by holding your attention on the box pattern, what you're not doing is paying attention to all the other thoughts that come. They'll still come and go. You can't not have those other thoughts because thoughts happen to you and you can generate thoughts. But most thoughts, the default mode is thoughts happen to you. 60,000 thoughts a day and 59,500 of them are the same thoughts that came to you yesterday. They just happen to you. And when you think you're thinking, it's when you're taking a thought that happens to you and you're grabbing onto it. And then you're generating secondary level thought like rumination or pondering or like planning, that type of thing. So when you're doing the box breathing practice, you're holding your attention simply on the box pattern. You're ignoring the rest of the default mode network thoughts. But what will happen is your mind, because it's especially in the early stages, will kind of wander over there and start ruminating or start grabbing on because it gets bored. And so then the practice is to notice that and to bring it back to the box. And so you're training now 3 things: arousal control, which we already talked about. That's the physiological. Now we're getting into the mind. Attention control, which is to hold my attention on just one thing. All I'm going to ask you to do is one thing. Just hold your attention on that box pattern. But notice when your attention either gets split and you're focusing on the box pattern and thinking about something, or if you've completely wandered off the reservation, Notice that, and notice it earlier and earlier, and come back to the box pattern and hold your attention on the pattern for longer and longer. And we're shooting for 50% of a 20-minute session. If you can hold your attention on the box pattern for 10 minutes, you're actually doing really well. And you're deepening your powers of concentration. It's like gathering up all your mental energy, which was being thrown out there like a floodlight, and you're focusing it like a laser beam, and you get really, really sharp and penetrating mind. That's extremely valuable.
And Mark, when you say 50%, now you've got my optimizing, point scoring, loving self going. I'm curious because I've done a number of mindfulness-y things. I even have the Muse headband. And so it'll give me some numbers about how much I was relaxed or whatever. But I'm curious, since I do find that quite motivating. Is there a means by which you can see, oh, I was 41%, last week, and now I'm 43%, or is that unknowable?
If you want to collaborate on creating a wearable that can track that, I'd be all ears. No, it's clearly subjective. I'll give you an example of why, or the reason why I know this to be true. I mentioned that this second part is very similar to Zen training. I spent 4 years training Zen before I went into the SEALs, under the watchful eye of a guy named Tadashi Nakamura, who's still alive. He's in his 80s in New York. He's a very famous grandmaster martial artist. Runs a martial art program that he created called Seido, which means the way of sincerity, and headquartered in Manhattan. So I was in Manhattan after college for 4 years, got my MBA at Stern School of Business, NYU, and believe it or not, became a certified public accountant in New York. But during that time, probably the most momentous thing that happened is I trained under this guy, starting as soon as I got to New York, I just stumbled into it. Since I was 21, I trained with him for 4 years. And of course, did all the karate stuff, got my black belt. But what really transformed me was he was a Zen teacher, had a Zen class every Thursday night, which I joined with about 10 other black belts. And we would then go to the Zen Mountain Monastery up in Woodstock, New York, several times a year for these long 4 to 5 day sits with the Zen monks. And the basic practice, and he never deviated from this, was, and you're sitting on your bench, was simply eyes closed, inhale, exhale through the nose, and count 1. But don't think of anything else. Inhale, exhale, count 2. Don't think of anything else. And the goal was to get to 10. And of course, the first few times I did it, I got to 10, no problem. But when I was honest with myself, I was thinking the whole time. And I realized, oh, shoot, now this is really serious. If you think, you have to go back to 0, right? So inhale, exhale, I'm doing great. Oh, shoot, I just had a thought. Back to 0. Inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. How am I doing? Oh, I'm doing good. I'm thinking. Back to 0. Or, if you start thinking your mind is just wandering off the reservation, which is going to do it until you train it. So it literally took me, Pete, about a year before I could, with integrity, say that I got to 5 without any thought, without any other competing thought in my head. And I once asked him about it, and he said that actually is really good for students of Zen to be able to have that. Now we're talking about roughly a 5-count inhale, 5-count. Back then he didn't specify. That was my ad later on. But we're roughly talking about just 1 minute. You know what I mean? 5 rounds is only about a minute. Wow. That's how busy your mind is. So if you can sit and still your mind for a minute and have no thoughts whatsoever, that is profound. The Buddha said once that you could find enlightenment in a single breath if you're paying close enough attention. So I think it's a great marker or target to shoot for. And anyone listening who tries it or has tried this will agree with that. It's not easy, right? It's really not easy because, again, the brain has just not been trained this way. I think there will be a time in the future where we teach these skills to young kids, kind of like they would do for the Panchen Lama or the Tibetan, monks for the kids. They start them young. It's extraordinarily valuable to do this type of training at a younger age when your brain is still developing. In fact, one of the reasons I think I had such extraordinary benefit with my meditation practice is because I was 21 when I started. And, now the male brain doesn't fully develop until its mid to late 20s. And so neuroplastically, my brain was just on fire, developing all these new pathways, all these new skills through my meditation practice in my early 20s. And it's completely changed my life. So it's a valuable, I think that's just I use that 50% just to partly to motivate people, but also to help them understand that, just be easy on yourself. This is not easy work. So be kind to yourself, in other words.
Understood. And so that we talked about being able to persist, hold our mind onto a task. I'd also like your take on how to start something. If we're dragging our feet, we're procrastinating, and I don't feel like it, have some avoidance. You have any pro tips there?
Probably the biggest pro tip is whatever you're going to do, whatever you want to do, make sure that you should do it. And so you say, what do you mean, Mark? Well, maybe remember earlier I said we should all be doing less things better. And then the question is, okay, good. I agree with that. But what things should I be doing that go in that bucket of less things? What makes it through that wicket? Well, it's the things that you should be doing. And the things that you should be doing are always going to be related to who you are, not what other people think you should be or should be doing, or what society thinks you should be doing, or what your parents think you should be doing. And so the most effective way to develop extreme motivation and personal accountability is to get clear on who you are and why you're on this planet and what you're going to do about it, your mission. So this is like one of the most fundamental things I teach. In fact, it also is probably the ultimate secret to resiliency and mental toughness is when you're doing what you know you're supposed to be doing. There is no quit. No matter what obstacle comes up to you, you just navigate it with grace because you know it's there to help you learn. And it's just something you have to go through. It's going to make you stronger. It's going to help you fulfill that mission. Now, my feeling is, unless you're blessed with this insight at a young age, is that the best way to really get clear about who you are and why you're here and then what you can do about it is through a practice of stillness. Well, guess what? Box breathing is. It's a practice of stillness. So we can build that into the practice. I mentioned earlier, box breathing is stacked practice. We've already talked about arousal control, attention control, concentration. It naturally opens up to mindfulness. And as I mentioned earlier, concentration is a prerequisite of mindfulness. The part of you that is practicing or that is focusing on the box pattern and that notices, the part of you that notices that your mind has wandered becomes your primary seat of awareness. In other words, instead of identifying with the thoughts, you become identified with the witness of those thoughts, which is the ultimate aim of mindfulness, is to seat yourself in the perspective of the witnessing, non-reactive, aware human being that is seeing thoughts and emotions happening to you and through you, but you're not caught up in them. You're just watching them as if you're watching a play. So when you develop that skill, then you're in a state of receptivity. Every other skill that I've talked about is the yang. It's an active process. But when you get into that witnessing awareness, then you've shifted into your contextual mind, your right brain, which is beyond space and time. It doesn't have the same construct. It doesn't create a sense of separation in space and time. That's all the function of your left hemisphere, your left brain. So you're in your right brain and you're in that witnessing awareness. And in that space, you become connected to the rest of your mind, your heart and your gut. And we now know that the heart and the gut are brains. They have neurons, neurological processing, neurochemicals, neurons itself. And so in that receptive space, the right hemisphere is what it connects to your heart mind and your biome, your gut mind, and your entire nervous system, your entire body becomes a mind and an antenna. And so in that very calm and receptive state, witnessing state, you begin to get messages from your heart. I mentioned earlier, my meditation led me into the SEALs. I knew nothing about the SEALs when I went down to New York. I was planning on being a CPA and making a lot of money and going into investment banking. But the longer I sat on that meditation bench, 2 years or 3 years into it, I started to get messages that I was meant to be a warrior and that I was misaligned, that I was heading down the wrong path fast. And it really kind of created like this existential crisis in me. Like I thought I had a midlife crisis at 23 years old because I'm like, well, how is it that I'm sitting here in a suit and tie and racing toward this MBA, CPA, and to make a lot of money? How is it that I'm supposed to be a warrior? Why am I getting all these signals that I'm 100% misaligned and going down the wrong path? And I'm going to live that life of quiet desperation that Henry David Thoreau talked about. Well, it's because my heart was telling me that I'm a warrior. I'm meant to be a warrior. And so I started to take it seriously. And I started to ask better questions. Well, if I'm meant to be a warrior, then how? How am I supposed to serve as a warrior? When you start getting close to your own truth, then synchronicity happens. So for me, the synchronicity showed up in the fact that I walked home one night kind of pondering this existential crisis I was having. And I walked right by a Navy recruiting office, and there was this poster there. And it didn't say SEALs on it. It said, be someone special. And it had pictures of Navy SEALs doing what I thought were pretty cool shit, like jumping out of airplanes. And I was like, that's it. Thank you, universe. That's how I'm supposed to be a warrior. So back to your question, if you lack motivation, it's probably because what you're doing is not the right thing. You're misaligned. What do you do then? That's a whole different discussion. Because if you're misaligned, it's not going to go away. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Your motivation is going to keep declining. You're going to get more and more burned out. You're going to feel more and more disconnected. And I think a lot of people in our culture suffer from that because they've been taught that I'm supposed to be a lawyer, or I'm supposed to be, right, a doctor or something. And it may be completely off from what they really are meant to be doing in this life. And when I say meant to be doing it, it's not a job or a career. It's who you are, but it can be encapsulated in a career. Like being a Navy SEAL was a job, but it certainly sparked and allowed me to express the warrior in me. But I always said that my purpose was to be a warrior, not a Navy SEAL admiral. Because if I had said I'm going to be a Navy SEAL admiral, that's my purpose, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. I'd be still in the Navy probably. But no, my purpose was to be a warrior. And that transcends the structure of what you do. It's really about who you are, what your beingness is. So if you're doing something that isn't in alignment with your beingness, then you will experience a little bit of crisis. And crisis literally means opportunity for transformation. That's what crisis means. So it's an opportunity for you. So to face that opportunity and say, okay, I hear what Mark's saying, and I think I'm in that boat. The reason I'm burning out and lacking motivation, it's not because I just have a shitty job. It's because I'm misaligned. So what I need to do is go learn to sit in silence and to open up my mind so that I can hear my heart's calling and get a greater understanding and some clarity about who I really am and why I am on this planet at this time so that I can align with that. And aligning with that might not be leaving your job. Like if you've invested 20 years or you're waiting for a pension or something like that, and you got a family to feed and a mortgage to pay, I'm not suggesting you just blow it all up, but you could find meaning through some service but maybe it's like you were meant to really work with the earth. You love just, and so you start a garden or you go develop a community garden somewhere. It's going to be different for every single person. And some people, I've worked with tons of clients who like literally have left their jobs to start their own business. Or, I think there's probably like 15 or 20 clients I've worked with who have gone off and written books because they really had that urge. They felt that need to really say something, put something out in the world creatively like that. So that's the fastest path to motivation really is to discover who you are and what you're meant to do about it. But that's a slow path, right? It can be a slow path. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes contemplation.
Big thanks to Mark for sharing his wisdom with us. Big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Shopify. When you're starting something new, what ifs abound. What if I fail? What if nobody cares? What if nobody buys my stuff? Shopify can help make things easy. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Magic Spoon and Allbirds to brands just getting started. Shopify facilitates everything from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to use a dozen different software tools. Everything's all in one place, making your life easier and your operations smoother. And what if you get stuck? Well, Shopify is always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand style. It's time to turn those what-ifs into ka-ching with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/awesome. Go to shopify.com/awesome. That's shopify.com/awesome. Ka-ching. One sponsor to check out is Vanguard. As we step into a new year, it's the perfect time for all the advisors listening to think about how to set up your clients for success. One way to do that is to level up your fixed income strategy. But bonds are tricky. The market is huge, rates shift, and risks hide in plain sight. That's why having a partner with scale and expertise matters. Vanguard brings both. Vanguard bonds provide top-grade products across the board. Their lineup includes over 80 bond funds actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. Vanguard's been in the game for a long time at a scale that gives them a serious edge. They're able to invest across many sectors, maturities, and geographies, spotting opportunities that others might miss. Vanguard takes a steady approach, focusing on reliability and consistency. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at vanguard.com/audio. That's vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. One sponsor to check out is Monarch. I don't enjoy thinking about or fiddling with money, so I love resources that make this quicker and easier. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is a gorgeous personal finance tool that makes your money life easier. It brings your whole money picture from budgets to accounts and transactions and investments into one super handy dashboard on your phone or laptop. I was such a fan of the old Mint.com and was super bummed when it disappeared. But the good news is that Monarch was founded by a team that includes the original product manager of Mint, and I dare say it's even better. I like the graphical summaries that help me drill down into things quickly and easily and helps me get to the bottom of anything that just seems off or weird or helps me zero in on great opportunities for savings faster. In fact, Monarch helped the average user save over $200 per month after joining. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code AWESOME at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code AWESOME. All right. Well, Mark, we're having fun here. It's time to hear about a few of your favorite things. Can you kick us off with a favorite quote? Something you find inspiring.
What a man can think and believe he can achieve. That was Napoleon Hill. The first book I read that ever really kind of touched on a greater human potential, right, than what most of us are taught. So Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't read Think and Grow Rich, that's a must read. I think I've read it about 10 times.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Think and Grow Rich. Do you have any other favorite books?
One of the books that really blew my mind and got me down the rabbit hole of what's possible for human beings. And it's the only book that Steve Jobs carried on his iPad, by the way. It's called The Autobiography of a Yogi by a guy named Paramahansa Yogananda. Yeah, it's a doozy. I highly recommend that one.
All right. A favorite habit?
Box breathing.
And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with people? They quote it back to you often?
Right. If you want to move fast and break things and do great things in the world, then you've got to slow down and spend time in silence every day. Spend time cultivating these qualities that we talked about in the show and get really clear around who you are and why you do what you do. So then you can go out and bring it to the world.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
MarkDivine.com, and Divine is spelled D-I-V-I-N-E. That's my personal website. Pretty much anything you need is there, would find interesting. Unbeatablemind.com is my training program. And so we've got great programs, great courses, and a community, and even a mental toughness certification that teaches all these principles, and you can go teach it to others or help others.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, I would challenge you, Peter, and your listeners to take up a practice of box breathing and try it out for 30 days. If you don't think you can afford 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, just do 10 minutes and 10 minutes, or just do 10 minutes in the morning, but do it every day for 30 days and prove that I'm right. Don't take my word for it. Be that study of N=1. Prove that I'm right. Because even 30 days of daily practice can be utterly transformative. So do that. I challenge you.
All right. Mark, thank you.
Yeah, hoo-yah. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you, Peter.
I love so much of what Mark had to say about when you have total clarity on your mission, it really does seem like there's no quit. And I've had this experience. I'm thinking about keynote speeches. It's like, okay, we got a lot of money here. We have scheduled this way in advance, so it doesn't matter what kind of nonsense happens with travel or technology or projectors or anything. This thing is happening. And I really have found I'm able to dig deep in that zone. And likewise, when it's crystal clear, like, ooh, big project, big potential, big impact, clear deadline. All right, it's just clear. There is no quit. And then it's just a matter of, well, how are we going to pull this thing off? And I find that really handy to take that upfront time to arrive at such clarity. It really does unlock something magical and hardcore. And there's a handy time and place for just that kind of state. Great stuff from Mark. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1137. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.